Hi, everybody. Welcome to L&D Talk. My name is Brent Schlenker. I'm the Chief Learning Officer at litmus.com. And I don't know why all these bells and whistles are going off, but they are, so we're just going to live with it. You can get a hold of me at B. Schlenker just about anywhere on the internet. You can also just ping me at Litmus on the Twitter, and also hit me up on Snapchat if you want. SCHLEARNING. Yes, Schlearning. It's a good one. But today is Monday, and this is the 8 o'clock hour. And if this thing just does not stop dinging, I am just, oh, I know what it is. Pardon my stopping momentarily. The speaker I'm using, I'm plugging into from the Yeti, and it's also a Bluetooth speaker. And so it was picking up my iPhone, and all of my notifications were going through that speaker. So glad it's gone. Okay, so step up is using it. So anyways, yeah, so once again, welcome Monday. This is the 8 o'clock hour. I do this Monday through Friday. It's kind of like office hours, kind of like just hanging out and talking learning and development with all of my colleagues and peers. If you're watching this video and you are not part of the industry, that's totally cool too. Feel free to jump in and hang out. If you have a need for a learning management system, go ahead and hit me up, and we can talk more about that. We don't talk a lot about learning management systems in the L&D talk, although we probably should. But we talk a lot about the industry and everything that we all do to try to thrive and survive in the things that we do. So I am just going to heads up, drop-ins won't show in recordings or audio archives yet, but we're working on it. That's okay. So if you're watching this video recording, you will probably see nothing momentarily. Perfect. That's our morning ad. Da, da, da. Figure out a way to use video somehow. All good stuff. Let me know if you want to talk about it. So today we're talking about PowerPoint, and there's several good reasons why I want to talk about PowerPoint. One, it always shows up in different tool reports and research analyses when people ask the industry and developers, what's the most popular learning tool? PowerPoint, I believe, I haven't looked at any of these in a long time, but it was number one for a long, long time. And my guess is it probably is still sitting in that number one spot. as far as creating educational materials, learning, and stuff like that. So Litmus has a PowerPoint module as well that you can just upload your PowerPoints into it. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that is probably the #1 module that is used, probably next to video. It's probably a toss-up between the video module and the PowerPoint module. But both very popular in general, no matter what type of system you're using. I think PowerPoint is great because you can upload it to SlideShare if you want to make it be, live and on the internet. You can actually use it as a presentation in a classroom, and well designed, of course, you can make it stand on its own if done correctly. So I want to talk a little bit about PowerPoint in our industry and how we use it, and maybe we'll talk a little bit about the history. But we've got Adam, who's going to jump into this seat right here. Adam, why don't you jump on in and let's have a little conversation about the PowerPoint. Unless you're still multitasking, then I'll still just fill space. Hey, Adam.
Hey, I can take a break.
Outstanding.
How you doing, Brent?
I'm well. How are you?
Good.
Yeah, good. Good to see you. So, you made a good point about PowerPoint. Let me just scroll back. See if I can find it. Oh yeah, favorite PowerPoint template, none. Favorite layout, blank. I believe that it should be the default, but it's not.
Right. And the thing that gets me about the PowerPoint haters is, they seem to think that the tool reaches through the screen, grabs you by the neck, and says you have to do bad bullet points and gradient backgrounds. No, you don't. It's just a tool. Those are
and 12-point font.
Yeah, those are really bad features. But you don't have to use them. To me, every tool has the very basic essence of what they're there for. Like Word is there to make documents, Excel, spreadsheets. PowerPoint's real purpose is just to have a rectangular screen that you can place vector-based objects on. That's all it is. Now, it was built for giving presentations. It was designed to help people really quickly make really bad presentations. But at its essence, it's just that rectangle with vector objects that you can do anything you want on.
Right. So I would argue that we got to this point because presentations were bad even before PowerPoint. Yeah. So, right. I mean, what was the technology prior to PowerPoint?
To make them bad.
Yeah. I don't think PowerPoint caused it. So we used to have overhead. We used to call them foils. Remember that?
Right, the transparencies.
Transparencies, yes. Transparencies, foils, overheads. I believe people used to just take 8.5 by 11 sheets of paper and just turn them into and print out a transparency with whatever they had on the and then present that in front of a group of people. So whether it was accounting numbers or engineering numbers or whatever, it was a way for everybody to just kind of project what they put on paper to a large crowd. I don't think anybody ever really thought design too much. I think sort of the whole design thinking movement and actually being more aware of your visuals, I think is a relatively new thing, don't you think?
Well, I mean, there were people who, charged a lot of money for those great, webinars where they had slide projectors in the carousel,
Oh, yeah.
Professionally made, and they look really good. But, this is like the 80s with when desktop publishing came out and all the typography purists said it was going to ruin, graphic design. But it didn't. It was just a tool, and it just made it easier for bad designers to make more stuff. But those newspapers, those penny saver newspapers that were made manually weren't any better than the penny newspapers made on Macintoshes.
Yeah, true, very true. So I don't so presentations weren't really the only sort of technology that has gone through this particular cycle, I guess is what we're saying. Yeah. So how do we
I think
so so tell me, give me an example of a project that you've used PowerPoint for.
My previous job was with a financial analysis data company similar to Bloomberg, and they had a product that their salespeople didn't understand because they didn't understand the workflow of the customer. And the workflow, it was for in an insurance analysis process. The workflow is really complicated. I mean, there was no way you couldn't talk about it and have people's eyes roll in the back of their head and fall asleep.
Right.
So I took PowerPoint and used all my little tricks to have, animations and blocks and diagrams and infographics going in different places to explain how data flows through the system. Now, people's eyes probably still went in the back of their head, but at least they could understand what was going on, and it was just, I used the tool at hand to be able to graphically explain something. It had nothing to do with doing a presentation.
So what about animations? Do you what's your take on those? Whether it's transitions between slides or animating some of the objects?
Well, my feeling about every single tool, from typing a letter on a keyboard, don't use it unless it does something for you. Unless it solves a problem, it's not worth it. So if you're going to do an animation because you have to show that a piece of data goes from here to there, sure, do the animation. But if you're just trying to make, wowsy stuff and razzle dazzle, it's not worth the trouble.
Razzle dazzle's not worth the trouble? Dang it. You're killing me.
On the other hand, sometimes you do have to get people's attention, but the problem is we're competing with Hollywood. PowerPoint's never going to compete with CGI. So
yeah,
that's the bar that was set.
Right. So, so where do we go from here with PowerPoint? We don't even have to limit this to PowerPoint, right? There's Keynote. Google has its own presentation tool. Was it called Google Slides or Google Presentation or something like that?
The same.
Yeah. I mean, all of the same sort of design philosophies apply. You can either use the tool well and learn some basic design principles to improve, your presentations, or not.
There's so many people out there who have great advice on making PowerPoint not like PowerPoint. Nancy Duarte, Jane Bozarth has her, no more bullet points. There's a lot of people who can help you really make, your stuff shine. I think what happens is now you start getting into the tools. When Articulate Studio was the go-to tool, that was just PowerPoint, bam, SCORM. But now they've got Storyline, Captivate, you're using variables. People are getting into just hand coding HTML5. I think people have gone beyond PowerPoint, but I think that when you're in a hurry and the customer is saying, look, I'm sorry, I cannot wait 6 months for this, banging out in PowerPoint, as long as you do a nice, clean and simple job, and you don't waste people's time, I think it's still a good tool.
Yeah. So you bring up a great point. So especially in our industry, creating e-learning is often the goal, right? And it's what we're tasked to do, or what we've decided we want to do for whatever reason. That'll be a whole different discussion. But so we've got all these great tools that are plugins to PowerPoint, right? And so we can do all of our design work, or we can take an existing PowerPoint presentation and export it, or use some of these plugins to add the sort of educational e-learning elements and then export it into a different format, SCORM or whatnot. How well do you think that's worked for us?
Well, I think the reason that a lot of people in the industry are angry about this is because, just like I said with desktop publishing, it allowed people who know nothing about instructional design to create, slideware, just slides and slides and slides that just deliver messages and don't really do anything else. I think that these tools, when we start saying, oh, they're learning tools, they're rapid development tools, we need rapid development. We need to get to our get the turnaround to our customers out there faster. We need, we need to be able to use the tools at hand. But I think that sometimes we use it as an excuse to put out crap, and I think that's what frustrates everybody.
Yeah, I think so too. I think so we get frustrated by the tool, and I think there's a lot of negativity around PowerPoint, but let's talk about some of the positives, right? I mean, why has it been around for so long, and what do we love about it? Unless you don't love anything about it.
Well, again, it goes back to that basic concept. It's this empty canvas. I'm a painter, amongst other things, and my artist friends can't believe I'm into technology the way I am. But to me, they're just canvases, and you can put anything you want on it. And unlike a painting program where you're or like Photoshop, where you're making pixels and you're making the pixels light and dark and you move them around and you don't have the layers right and they, everything gets mushed together. PowerPoint is just a bunch of objects, very easy to move around really fast. But you don't need bullet points. You don't need, fancy transitions. You don't need, goofy shapes and stuff like that. Just having great images and words, and really treating the words almost as an image themselves, you can make some beautiful things.
Yeah, it's interesting. So I think in our industry, there's a lot of designing and artistic people that work in the e-learning industry, because at the end of the day, at its core, I think it's really a creative process that we go through, right? It's a mix of a whole bunch of different creative artistic disciplines that we bring together to create educational content. It can be the creativity of programming. It can be the creativity of user interface design, of art, of vector graphic design, of photography, of even music, for sound beds, voiceovers, the creativity of audio, of script writing. If you're going to do some voiceovers, I mean, there's a lot of different things that come together and play in our industry that work. And I think one of the things I don't want us to forget about tools like PowerPoint is that, number one, not everybody has that creative talent and has that ability, and they might be okay with learning just some basics of design and having some basic principles to work with. And then they just work within those constraints and just throw their content in and don't worry too much about the design. And I always think that maybe that's originally what PowerPoint was trying to do. And over time, it just sort of got abused, because people would try to fit too much on one slide, for example, and so the font just kept getting smaller and smaller and smaller to cram everything onto one slide. But I think there are times where it's okay to just push something out, and even if it's not perfect. And Craig has to take off, so we'll say goodbye to Craig.
Hi, Craig.
who's been here. So even with PowerPoint alone, you have the ability to encourage structure of the sharing learning. Yes. And that's the other cool thing too. So do you remember back in the early days of PowerPoint, when PowerPoint really wasn't all that powerful? It didn't have like the links that you could do to different slides and all that kind of stuff. It was basically just, you couldn't use buttons or anything like that. You basically could create a new slide and put stuff on it and move to the next slide, and that was it. And I think
well, there's a lot of people who think that's all it still does.
Right. But it's like everything else from the Microsoft tool chest, right? It's got all of this great functionality, but most people only use like 10% of what it can really do because that's really all they need.
Right.
Hence all of these other new tools that have come up. I think it's always going to be one of the most powerful tools in our toolbox. If for no other reason than everybody knows how to use it. And so if we need help getting started on a project, we can use a subject matter expert and say, hey, put together just a PowerPoint presentation for me of your content, or if you've already got one, send it my way, and then we fix it.
And then I'll put the learning pixie dust on it.
Exactly, right? I know. And that's normally what we're asked to do. But quite honestly, I used to be the guy that would talk very badly about that. But you know what? If that's the process that we have to go through, I mean, it's better than starting from scratch, right?
Yeah. I think speaking of the tools, each of the features that they put in every time they make a release, the software companies, it's what they're trying to sell you on upgrading. So they're like, this feature is so important, you've got to use it, and they want everybody to use it to its full maximum ability so that it's exciting, rather whatever.
Yeah.
But a lot of these tools are best used very, very subtly. One little small animation, one object little moving away, or one thing fading away, has a really nice effect. But when you take the tools and say, hey, look, I'm using this tool, then it gets ugly.
Yeah, it can get ugly really fast. I think like anything else, though, I guess in design, it's that whole sense of understanding minimalist thinking to a certain extent. I mean, we have a tendency as subject matter experts in any field to want to, if somebody comes to us and says, hey, explain this to me or whatever, we like to explain everything. We give them everything, right? We give them all the information, and it ends up being, more often than not, way too much. And I think as subject matter experts, they do the same for us when we go to them and say, hey, we want to, do an e-learning, right? Or do some sort of course based on the content that Yeah. I mean, the first thing that they want to do is share everything that they know because they're passionate about it. And then it's our job as designers to strip that down to just what's necessary. What's that?
You don't want to lose all that, so you've got to keep it in. So you need more bullet points, more slides.
Exactly. Well, I think one of the things that I learned, and during a few projects actually, is in order to keep the subject matter experts happy, don't get rid of all of that content. And this was only just because of the technology that came. In the earlier days, we couldn't do this, but once we started having things like wikis and really easy to use blogs and things like that, I would just tell them, give me everything and let's put it right here, right? And make some sort of repository for all their content. It makes them feel really good. And, you can give learners and users the ability to access that. But then when it comes to the instruction, strip it all down and apply the pixie dust.
Yeah. I think people get mixed up between presentations and documents, as if no one will ever read a document. I mean, we read documents all the time. We read articles, and we're very comfortable reading text down a page, in paragraph format. So if that's the content you have, just send them to the wiki, send them to the blog article. PowerPoint is a great tool for making, the key statements, but it doesn't have to make all of your statements.
Right. Well, remember back in I don't think this is the case anymore, but in the earlier days of the web, I can very much remember some web designers that would say, oh my God, whatever you do, avoid scrolling. People hate to scroll. Don't make people scroll. Whatever you do, don't. Yeah. I mean, and at all costs, your design should not include scrolling, only unless it's absolutely necessary. And now we scroll all the time, and it's no big deal. Nobody really seems to care.
Right. It's cool. They do parallax scrolling. I think, again, it's this pick the tool that solves the problem. I had an art teacher who gave me a great metaphor for this. He said, imagine yourself making a spaghetti and meatball dinner. What's the most interesting part? The meatballs. What's the least interesting part? The spaghetti. How much spaghetti do you have? A lot. How much meatballs do you have? A little. The interesting thing should be very, very small because you want to get people's interest. If the whole thing is meatballs, no one's going to pay attention.
Guys, I like that. That's a great analogy. I hadn't thought of it. It's a great way of explaining the use of white space.
Right.
Most people like to fill the whole screen with something. If there's too much space, they feel like they haven't done their job and they need to put more stuff on it, right? As opposed to skilled designers like the skilled chef knows to leave a lot of that white space and make the important things stand out by having that space around it. It's an interesting topic for sure. So where is PowerPoint going? Let's pontificate a little bit before our hour runs out. Where do you think PowerPoint can go next? Does it go away?
Man, I mean, it's hard to see where it would go because I think we're going to start breaking out of the rectangle. I think having the rectangle as a basis, as a platform to work on, was great, but I think that we need to break out. When Prezi came out, even though people aren't that excited about Prezi now, the idea that you had an infinite space, not just one rectangle,
right?
To come in and out of. The idea that maybe you could start off at the rectangle, but open up different windows, open up different views, open up different ways of looking at things, bringing up videos or blogs. But moving around in and out of the space, because that's what we do all day on the internet. We're not stuck in one rectangle.
Right. So how does that, do we go virtual? Like, what does PowerPoint look like in a virtual world? Is it still that rectangle just kind of floating out there in space as we're looking through our 3D goggles in virtual reality? Or does it completely go away and that same content that we used to put into a PowerPoint presentation, is that what's floating out there in the infinite space?
Yeah, I don't know. I think we're gonna have to go beyond it. It's interesting that somebody mentioned Google. I use Google Apps, even though the functionality is much smaller than Microsoft. You don't need all that stuff, So I think that maybe, people are just going to use Google Slides for the minimum thing that they need, to get ideas started, like you said, with your SME, and then move on to other tools, the virtual tools, and so on, and break it out.
My workflow always goes from somebody sending me a PowerPoint to immediately converting it and opening it up in Keynote, just because it's so much easier. It's so much more elegant. You can very just quickly do some really good design, and that sort of the defaults that Keynote gives you are much more design related and not so data and content related. At least that's been my experience. And so it makes it, at least anyways, I feel like I can be a better designer, even though I'm not a trained designer. I'm not a graphic designer in any sense. But I always feel like I've done a better job when I'm inside of Keynote than when I'm in PowerPoint. And I guess to a certain extent, what you're saying, it shouldn't really be like that, right? Like my design capabilities should translate into any tool, right?
Yeah, but I mean, some tools just feel better.
So we're just used to using some tools rather than other tools. If the thing that I also like about Keynote, and I like how it converts to other media as well. So being able to use Keynote even like an image creation tool. So I create, you can export as a JPEG, just one slide. I think you can kind of do the same thing in PowerPoint as well. But the integration of that is really easy. And also being able to create videos with Keynote. I think PowerPoint allows you to do that as well. But I never really started doing it and getting good at it until I started using Keynote a lot more. And I don't know why that is, but maybe it's just because sort of the whole multimedia aspect is built right into the Mac environment and more focused on that than PowerPoint. But have you ever done that kind of stuff using any sort of the presentation tool?
Yeah. Can I show you something? Am I able to share my screen?
You can't share a screen, but if you've got like a YouTube link, you can drop the YouTube link in the live chat, and then I'll drop it in the other window.
I'm trying to think where I would find what I'm looking for. I'll have to check. I do collages in PowerPoint.
Oh, cool.
And let's get back to my screen here. I used the effects of dropping out backgrounds and images and doing overlays and transparencies and so on. And you would never in a million years know it was PowerPoint. It looks totally wild. And people ask me, well, why would you do this in PowerPoint? Why wouldn't you do it in Photoshop? Don't you know Photoshop can do all this? I'm like, oh yeah, I can do it 100 times more. But in Photoshop, I would get stuck in, I've got to make this, texture just right. And I would be working on it all day. PowerPoint, because it's got a limited palette of tools, forces me to think simply.
Yeah.
And
you're working within constraints, right? And isn't that what we always say? It's like creativity and innovation tends to thrive in a constrained environment. And PowerPoint is that constraint, I think. It's a powerful constraint, I think, because you're right. I get lost inside of Photoshop. I try way too hard to use all the cool tools and try to make it just perfect. And at the end of the day, I'm like, I could have made that circle in PowerPoint and it would have been a lot easier. So what other kind of stuff do you use PowerPoint for?
Diagrams. I love, Visio and things like that, but you don't always have Visio. It's an expensive tool. So I do a lot of infographics on PowerPoint.
Oh, cool. Yeah, it's built for it. It's got some plugins too, or some templates for like org charts and things like that to kind of help you get started, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Let's see. I think even Visio has a plugin.
Let's see if I can give you a URL to one of my collages. Not sure this will work.
It's a big one. Let me see if I can just grab it here.
Yeah, I have no idea whether that will work. I pulled it off of Facebook.
Yeah, it doesn't seem to like it.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, PowerPoint's got some really good design tools. Nothing like Visio, nothing like any of the big tools, but being able to make objects, connecting them. I'm a big fan of Edward Tufte.
Oh yeah, absolutely. He's the man.
I try to know lines, that don't, he always says that lines are actions. They're not just decoration. So your shapes should not have lines around them. being able to explain things with a diagram to me is a learning process. So I like having diagrams in my learning content.
So, so how do you use that in an instructional sense, right? Like, so do you, because one thing I've found is, and this will be good. I'd love to hear what you have to say about it, but I've found that just looking at a diagram for me can be just a little bit overwhelming, not really too sure where to focus. I just kind of get distracted all over the diagram and then don't really end up, consuming it and really understanding it very well. But if I'm watching somebody, like these are my favorite types of like TED Talks or any other type of presentations where somebody is either sketching while they talk or actually only making certain aspects of the diagram appear while they're talking. Then that works a lot better for me. How do you use it?
So I start off with the diagram. I duplicate the slide. I put white boxes over the parts that I'm not talking about and make those transparencies so that they're faded into the background. And I focus on the one part that I've left clear and talk about that. And then I move the slide. I duplicate the slide again and move the white pieces around so that I talk about the next part and so on. So with one diagram, I can talk to people about the different sections.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I love that. That's a great instructional way to use diagrams, I think. And I don't think people do that enough. I think that it's such a simple, I mean, it takes a little extra effort in the design of it, but I think it's such a simple, I don't know if I want to call it a trick, but a simple, effective method of using PowerPoint to walk somebody through a process or walk somebody through a diagram and to not distract them with the other content until you're absolutely ready to move them to that content. One of my favorite moves in PowerPoint that I learned from Nancy Duarte's books is I forget what the transition is called. I think it's called slide, but where the the transition isn't just one thing zooming over the other one or coming off it and revealing another one. It's sort of like the screen is here, the next screen is here, and it moves like that.
As if you're walking through a room, similar to the video you showed at the beginning.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Exactly like that. And so, but she would use it. It was very cool in different ways where she would actually use it going up or going over, and there would always be lines or something to that effect that would go over. Yeah. So it doesn't even feel like you're in a presentation anymore. It does feel like you're more in a Prezi type space where there's this infinite amount of space that you're just moving around in. And I thought it was cool to be able to figure out how to do that, via PowerPoint. Who'd have thought?
Yeah. There's a few very subtle ways to make that effect, that ability to kind of make you feel like you're not in a presentation.
Yeah, completely. Like just the edges, just getting rid of that rectangle that you're talking about, right? Like the limitations of just the rectangle and forcing people to stay in that. It gives people the illusion that they're no longer in that rectangle anymore and that they're in a much deeper, more three-dimensional, larger space. It's fun. Those tips and tricks are great. So let's close out with this. What other tips do you have? So Edward Tufte, Mark, thank you so much for throwing in that link. Fabulous design guy. He's got a bunch of books out there. I have not read all of them, but I have been a follower of his for a while. There's a website, not that particular website, but there was a blog for a while that he ran with a couple other user interface designers, and dang it if I can't remember the name of it. But anyways, he's had some good stuff. We mentioned Nancy Duarte, presentationzen.com is a good one. What else? Oh my gosh, I know there's tons of resources out there.
Quite a few of them. But, the thing is, we tend to look at learning stuff. Look beyond learning stuff. What what design do you like? What magazines do you like? What websites do you like? What what styles do you like? What resonates with you visually? Go look at those things. Print them out and put them on your wall. The things that you feel are really nice and clean. I mean, a lot of people love what Apple does. Don't just go to the screen and go and shop. Look at how Apple does it. Why are their pages always seem so clean? What are they doing with the edges of pictures and so on?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, yeah, you're speaking my language for sure. I've always enjoyed looking outside our industry for inspiration as to how we can be better at what we do. And I do have a tendency to forget that from the graphic design perspective as well. But like looking at user interface, the UX community, user experience community is another great place to look too. I know, thinking of other resources, I know since Articulate is so well integrated with PowerPoint and is such a good rapid tool, I know they have a lot of PowerPoint tutorials on just because they're so integrated with it. They've got a lot of resources on how to just do better PowerPoint. And encourage people to do that. And I'm not exactly sure what the exact link of that is, but I think if you go to eLearning Heroes or something like that, you can get some great PowerPoint stuff. But anyways.
The bottom line is the tools serve you. You don't serve the tools.
Beautiful saying. Beautiful, beautiful saying. The tools serve you. You don't serve the tools. I think if Craig was here, he'd quote that and throw it up on Twitter, but he had to bail out early for a meeting. Jay, nice to see you. You're late, my friend, but we're going to be wrapping it up here. So we're talking PowerPoint today on Monday. It doesn't like rhyme. You can't say like PowerPoint Monday. There's no day that starts with P. So no alliteration in today's title. But anyways, I'll cut us short here. Adam, thanks for hanging out with me today and talking PowerPoint. Appreciate it.
Thanks for talking to you, Brent.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks. We'll talk to you later.
All right,
and
take care.
For everybody else, all right, thanks. My name is Brent Schlenker. I'm here every Monday. Every Monday through Friday. It's L&D Talk, 8 a.m. Pacific time. You can follow me at Litmus on Twitter. You can follow my Snapchat at the very strange and odd name of Schlearning, SCHLEARNING. And if you want to find out more about Litmus, reach out, let me know. If you're in the market for a learning management system, you might be interested in a cloud-based system. But everybody who hung out in the live chat today, I appreciate it. If you're watching this on video, thank you very much. Go ahead and leave a comment if you're watching this in YouTube, or if you want to just reach out and find out more about what I do or what Litmus does. I'm always happy to talk with folks about it. Love the industry. I love what we're doing. I got some great announcements coming up in the next week or so, so everybody should hang tight. And 2016 is going to be a good ride. So everybody have a great Monday. We'll see you tomorrow morning, 8 o'clock.